So a question I often get asked in my live streams and sometimes in my YouTube comments is, what is my political affiliations? You know, what do I really believe in? And I really want to take this chance in this video to outline my political evolution from, I guess, a teenager to me now, and I am now 23. And yeah, before we get into everything, if you like my content, please leave a like on the video. It really does help the channel, and if you're new, potentially subscribe as well. And with all that out of the way, let's get into it. So in numerous other videos, I've talked about my love of history as a kid as really being key into getting me into politics. So when I was younger, I was obsessed with, in particular, World War II. I loved World War II books. I loved the World War II films, like Saving Private Ryan, The Thin Red Line. Things like that, probably things I shouldn't have been watching as a kid, but I loved them. And then at the same time, I was sort of growing up during the War on Terror. I remember 7/7 in London. I don't remember 9/11 well. I kind of remember it, but I was only like 5 years old, I think, at the time. Maybe 6, I'm not too sure. And then there's other things going on. Like, I used to love watching the news because I loved like the battles and the war. So a lot of the time on the news when I was a kid, 2007, 2008, you had a lot of the British fighting in Afghanistan, and I remember there was these documentaries about Ross Kemp visiting the soldiers there. I think there's 2 of them. So I was always super fascinated with that, and I guess because of my love for military stuff and war, it kind of positioned me more to being right-wing, even though I wouldn't describe myself that, but I'm going to get into my sort of evolution. But yeah, that's what I loved when I was a kid. Now, yeah, as I got older, I learned more about history, and then I learned more about politics. And the first big political event I guess I remember is the Recession. And I also remember Obama being elected in 2008 and the Recession both happened around about the same time. And I remember watching it on the news. I was only 12 years old, but I still remember it, like how historic it was. So in terms of the Recession in Britain, you would have the BBC reporting on it. And because it was a Labour government in charge at the time, they took a lot of flack for it, even though Gordon Brown was key in really helping us recover and saving us for a lot of the worst effects of it. It was always associated with Blair and Brown, and I remember Tony Blair resigning in, I think it was 2007. And I remember towards the end of his term as Prime Minister, Gordon Brown had some various gaffes. He called someone like a really bigoted woman on radio, and I don't think he was meant to say it on air, but he did. So it was all going bad for him. And then obviously the Tories won in 2010, but they didn't get the majority, so they jumped into bed with the Liberal Democrats, and the Liberal Democrats represent my district. So yeah, that all happened as I was, becoming a young adult. I guess I was 14 when that election happened. And then round about then, 15, 16, I started watching the Young Turks. So they obviously influenced me a lot in terms of American politics. They educated me on everything. I remember particularly when I was about 16, the Trayvon Martin stuff happened. So that was a big influence on me in really waking me up to police brutality, waking me up to all these sort of crazy things in America. And I always loved TYT. I remember the election coverage, and I talked about this before. I remember Cenk making fun of Paul Ryan drinking so much water during his debate with Joe Biden, the vice president debate. And I remember watching the debates, watching the speeches at the DNC from people like Bill Clinton endorsing Obama. And yeah, so that was a good influence on me, I guess. And I guess you could say that makes me, I guess, more left wing. But then obviously I'm going to get into who I voted for the first chance I get. So as I got older, I learnt more about British politics, but also when you're that age and you are sort of, woke and smart enough in a way to realise a lot of things, when people start championing social causes without any knowledge, it kind of gets under your skin. So I remember I would get super annoyed at people I knew who weren't very bright or intelligent or even understand the issues, really talking about how much they hated the Tories or how much, they were pro-Palestinian and stuff. And I was thinking, you guys don't understand this. Why are you so passionate about it? Do you have any, individuality? And then that's why I would think, oh, the Tories can't be that bad. It's just people being hysterical and just saying all these things. So when I was 19, we had the election in 2015. It was between Ed Miliband and David Cameron, and I voted Conservative. So in my area, you had the choice between Liberal Democrat or Conservative, And it's not as bad as you may think. For example, the person I voted for worked as a doctor in Palestine and worked as a doctor in Nigeria treating leprosy. It's not your traditional evil right-winger you think of, in America, for example. But obviously, by default, that is a vote for the Conservative Party as a whole, even if it's one particular candidate wasn't actually that bad or that different from the Liberal Democrats that I could have voted for as well. So yeah, I voted for the right wing when I was 19. I didn't regret it. I wasn't ashamed of it at all. I didn't feel bad. And that goes to show how naive you can be, even if you are, I guess, a smart person. I was doing my history degree at the time. I had finished my first year of history, and I was a decent person as well. Like I said, I love TYT. At this time, this is when Bernie Sanders was getting prominent for the first time, 2015. I like Bernie Sanders, but I voted Conservative. And that's just showing how naive I was about the world and about politics. And I'm a dumb 19-year-old kid. I don't understand what the Conservatives are about, really. I don't understand historically that they've been bad. The only exposure I've had to them is the last, I guess, 5 years, and everything kind of seems fine, and in my life it's been fine. And then historically, when I was researching it for maybe Victorian politics, and I see people like Disraeli, who maybe did some good things in terms of reforms and stuff, I kind of thought, they can't be that bad. And then Ed Miliband, I still think to this day, he seems like a bit of an idiot. And also, as I've got more left-wing, as I've gotten older, I don't like him anyway, because I just don't like, really rich people running left-wing parties and stuff, like him and his brother. His brother was like the chairman of Sunderland, or he was a heavy investor in Sunderland Football Club. So yeah, I don't agree with him today. Obviously that would have been a way better choice. We would have avoided all this mess with Brexit. But again, we couldn't see that far into the future, and he just wasn't very appealing, and he couldn't speak properly, even though he does seem like a nice guy underneath, I guess an exterior that isn't great for politics, which is all about being very presentable and everything. So yeah, I voted Conservative in 2015. And then the next year we had Brexit. I am 20 at this point, going on 21. I am super Remain. I'm very passionate about it, very passionate about debunking all the arguments. I remember how awful the right-wing's arguments were. It was basically all xenophobic. It wasn't about the merits of really leaving a market or anything. It was about Turkey going to join the EU. Oh no, 100 million Muslims might have access to this country. They come work here, they come live here. You want to vote against that. But the facts just did not match up with that. And then on the radio, you would have them saying this on public radio, on the BBC, because they would have these adverts saying, Turkey are going to join the EU, making it easier for terrorists to get to the UK. All this garbage. And it really made me super angry. And I think a lot of people in my generation, I understood what the EU was, because I'd done it in geography A-level, and I'd kept up to date on everything to do with the EU. But most people don't understand what the EU is, and I don't blame them. It's like a trading bloc with so much more to it. Most people don't know the first thing about the EU. So I don't blame them, and they were conned, and because this economy was not working for a lot of people, poorer people, thought it was a chance to change their lives and stuff. But at the same time, I would say, who do you trust? Would you trust free right-wing millionaire opportunists in Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, who led the Leave campaign, or would you trust literally every other single person, including Jeremy Corbyn, Sadiq Khan, Theresa May, David Cameron, the leader of the Lib Dems, Vince Cable? All those people were for Remain against us free, nut jobs on the right. So a bit of critical thinking is needed. But yeah, that was a turning point for me, and I was like, I am never voting right wing again or anything like that. And I'd really become more woke in terms of my politics, because Trump was happening at the same time as the Brexit stuff, and I was really supportive of Bernie Sanders. So yeah, this is really like a moment for me where I become deeper involved in, I guess, left-wing politics. And then Trump gets elected, and I could see obviously how bad a candidate Hillary Clinton was, and that really woke me up to the economic side of these arguments. And then we get Trump, and that's just an awful thing. And for a lot of people, Trump is the thing that I guess made them more left-wing, but it wasn't for me. It was more just like the Conservatives and Brexit and everything. And then in 2017, we had another election called by Theresa May, who obviously took over David Cameron, to try and increase her majority. And I gleefully watched as her majority went down, and Labour did pretty well. And although I voted for the Liberal Democrats this time, it was an anti-Tory vote to get the Tories out of the seat in my region. And Thankfully they did, so that cut their majority as well. But even at this time I was arguing with people, you know, you got to vote for the lesser of two evils, and I guess it does make sense in this context, but now I don't think that as much, and that is another area where I have progressed a fair bit, because now I think generally you should just vote your conscience and vote the people you want in, and try and make other people understand the benefits of voting for them. So for example, in 2019 I voted for the Green Party in the European elections, and they actually did pretty well in Europe, and they did pretty well in England compared to what they normally do in the national elections. And I felt good about that. I was like, these people represent an issue in terms of climate change, something I feel really, really strongly about. They represent some radical change that is needed, and I don't really regret voting for them at all, and I'm happy I did. And that really shows my shift, because obviously green politics is heavily influenced by socialism and Marxism, especially the origins of it in Germany and everything. So I don't feel bad about that at all. But that is just on the surface my political evolution. But I guess through my YouTube channel and making this content, I've been further exposed by it. And I also have to say, I started doing my masters at the end of 2017. And while my degree was in history, and that helped me understand a lot of issues in terms of foreign policy, the masters was a lot better because I approached things from a more ideological and economic perspective. And even if my masters never gets me a good job, I don't mind, because it has taught me so much about the world. So one of the first modules we did was just learn about various ideologies and looking at the world history and international relations through the prism of things like socialism, feminism, communism, and all these different ideologies. Another one I liked called Realism. And that super influenced me. I was like, this is so interesting, and I've never thought about the world in this way, especially the socialist and realist aspects I found myself really agreeing with. And that's the good thing about university, is that you get challenged, and I can't believe how different I was from graduating in December 2018 from my masters and graduating in July 2017 from my degree. My politics had really changed a lot, even though the core I guess was similar, but everything else had changed so much. And then, you know, I did other modules, like I learned about US foreign policy, but we looked at it through like the lens of imperialism, how they took over from the British, and that really made me think in different terms as well. And then we looked at the Middle East and how things like the Arab Spring, it's not about being anti-authoritarianism, although that's part of it, it's more about being anti-capitalist. That's all super interesting stuff, and it really, really influenced me. And then I'm making these YouTube videos at the same time, and the last 6 months I've been really getting into this breadtube stuff and watching more of it and making more videos in line with the politics of that subreddit and that community. And yeah, it's just changed my whole beliefs. And I said to my friend the other day, because I wrote something for the Communist Party of Great Britain as a freelancer, and I was like, I don't know what a 19-year-old me would think of 23-year-old me in terms of my politics. Like if I told them, oh yeah, I got paid to write something for the Communist Party, they'd be like, oh, you're such an idiot, what, you're a communist now or something? And I'm going to get into where I've landed with my political beliefs, but yeah, it's just funny to see the change, and I'm so happy I've woken up. I'm so happy I've woken up to how bad the Conservatives are as well. I feel like people never do in some instances. I'm so happy I've woken up to how bad centrism is, how bad, I guess, general capitalism is as well. It's something I didn't really think about when I was doing my history degree. And because of the broad scope of history and all the areas you're looking into, I guess economics sometimes gets put in the background. Whereas when you're doing a politics degree, it's right in the forefront, and I'm just really thankful I did that. Now, where have I landed? Where has my evolution led me to? Well, I broadly agree with things like Marxism in terms of their criticism of the world, the criticism of how we interact with each other, and just the way our societies are structured and organised. I totally agree with stuff like that, and I think it's great, and I think most people should read it. Whether I agree with its solutions to the problems, I'm not too sure, to be honest, because I don't give it too much thought. What would a world that is communist look like in 2019? I kind of find it hard to see it in my head. Is the best thing we can hope for is, I guess, socialism mixed with capitalism? Is that the meeting in the middle that we might have to do? Also, things like realism is stuff I believe, and that is basically countries dealing with each other, and it's all about power. You know, morals don't matter. So when the US says it's going to Iraq to bring democracy, that is just lip service it's paying, because it's all about power, it's all about resources, and states only coexist when it's mutually beneficial. But when it's not, they will start to fight each other because it's just all about power at the end of the day. So China and the US, despite being quite hostile, they do need each other, so that's why they don't fight each other. And it's really got its origins with Thucydides and Machiavelli, and then this other guy called E.H. Carr who's the more modern father of it. But it's really interesting. I think people should check it out. And I guess there are other opinions I have that people who are socialist wouldn't really agree with me on. And of course I hate the American empire. I hate all these massive empires, but at the same time, sometimes it's about who is the worst of all these empires. And there is an argument to be made somewhere like China, where you have a social credit system. I'd rather them not take over parts of the world, and I'd rather the US if I had to choose. Obviously, I'd rather no one. And in the terms of my own country's politics, in terms of British politics, I will happily say, Britain, stop selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, stop doing all these things, you don't need to do it. But I don't have to think on this macro scale where if I don't, sell someone weapons, another country will do it and they'll get their influence. So if America pulls back from the world, for example, as its biggest superpower, if America just focuses on itself, then Russia and China will replace it. And that is just the reality of what's going to happen. And for example, you see in Turkey right now, despite them, Turkey and Russia hating each other 2 years ago, Turkey are now buying Russian weapons, and Russia are now selling Saudi Arabia weapons as well. And I'm sure China would love to expand their market. So it's super complicated, and I don't envy the people like Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard or Elizabeth Warren, if they become president, having to make these choices about, I super, to my core, disagree with what we're doing. But when I have to weigh up all sides, and I know people might think I'm sounding like a neocon, I don't support intervention. I know you can rationalise things like that. But I just think it's an interesting thing to keep in mind sometimes when you're thinking about world politics. And I guess that's where the realism that I believe in eats into my socialism, because socialists should not ever believe in that. You're not going to be like, well, if someone's going to sell them it might as well be us. Do you know what I mean? That's not a good way to think. But I'm saying we're all hypocrites in a lot of ways. No one's ideology is uniform. I would be happy to discuss these things and change my mind on them. I'm always open to changing my mind on things. And what I've learned is the biggest thing you should be doing is be open to changing your mind on things. No matter how smart you think you are, no matter how many degrees or your masters you have, like me, I'm still open to it because I know I've been so wrong in the past. And despite me having a keen interest in a lot of these academic things, having a keen interest in history for all my life essentially, and I love that stuff, and I know it really well. The amount of growth I've done from 19 to 23, it is crazy to me. So I don't think I'm going to stop now that I'm 23. I think I'm going to keep being influenced by other things and influence of things I agree with and things I discover, because you can't know everything. Like I said, I did a history degree. When I did a master's in politics, I got exposed to the ideology and the economic side of things, and it completely changed my worldview. And that's why you need to keep an open mind, and that's why I think conservatives are wrong, because being conservative means you don't have an open mind. It means you're for the status quo. It means you are for how things are. You're not open to changing your opinion. So that's why I think there isn't two sides to every story. It's not like, here's what conservatives think, here's what liberals think. It's literally, you're either open to change and open to exposing yourself to more truths, or you're just closed-minded and you don't want to, and you just want to uphold the status quo. And conservatives are great people as a voting bloc for propping up the rich and propping up the system we have at the moment. So in summary, I guess I was always leaning towards the left. And you can tell that by my love of American politics and who I've always liked in American politics through watching things like TYT. But at the same time, I think my love of history, and especially my love of military history, really set me down the path of voted Conservative for the first time. When I would think about Jeremy Corbyn, I'd be like, he wants to get rid of nuclear submarines. How could he and stuff? But then I've obviously changed my mind as time has gone on. But thankfully, through education, through reading, through doing various different disciplines in university, I have come to a better conclusion, and I feel better about what I believe in today than what I believed in the past. And even through my opinion of Jeremy Corbyn, I think that is the biggest thing. I didn't like Jeremy Corbyn when he first came on the scene, but I always respected his honesty and respected how he always said what he meant, I guess. He never really said things to please people. But now I really like him. And I like him because of that, but I also agree what he says. And I think that's the best indicator of how much I've changed. I know from live streams and comments, a lot of you are from places like the Middle East, a lot of you are from America. and I assume your backgrounds and everything are going to be super different to mine. So I would be really interested in reading some of your own stories about how much you've changed and how you have grown into the politics that now see you subscribe to channels like mine. But yeah, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this. It was very rambly and I was just trying to get all my thoughts out there. It's not the most scripted or structured video. So thank you if you stayed with it. If you want to find me on social media, follow me at the Kavernacle on both Twitter and Instagram. Check out my links in my description. I have a WordPress blog where I just write articles. I need to get back on that a bit really. And I also have my Patreon, and thank you to all my patrons. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.